Hello everybody, and welcome to the Blueworks Live July 2019 release preview session. I'm Margaret Thorpe, Blueworks Live Offering Manager, and today I'm going to be giving you an overview of the Blueworks Live release that's coming out this weekend on Saturday, July 13th. So this release of Blueworks Live provides a more productive user navigation experience, enhances the Blueworks Live Service ID, and improves support for IBM ID users. Amongst the navigation improvements, editors and contributors can now set pretty much any Blueworks Live page as their default start page, and any views that are in effect on that page will be saved and applied at login. The default positioning of the cursor is now on the filter field on library pages. When the user enables key views or filters on the Blueworks Live library pages, those choices are now retained for the entire user session unless they're explicitly reset. Diagram preferences, in particular activity numbering and reset text to fit, will remain in effect throughout the user session for all blueprints unless they're explicitly reset. And the active archived filters behave consistently across Blueworks Live now. Now, as far as the service ID enhancements go, most Blueworks Live APIs are now available for use with the Service ID. The Service ID now supports invocation of Blueworks Live APIs with a user context parameter. And for accounts that want to restrict API usage to the Service ID, basic authentication can now be disabled for API access or vice versa. So we've also improved support for IBM ID users. IBM ID users can now copy artifacts across Blueworks Live accounts. They can also log in using an IBM ID that is federated with their corporate SSO. And just-in-time provisioning is available for those users as well. And finally, there's a new blog post and tutorial available about Blueworks Live Glossary Management. So let's take a look at these enhancements in more detail. And first off, let's look at how we've improved the navigation experience across the Blueworks Live library. So Blueworks Live editors and contributors can pretty much select any Blueworks Live page as their start page now, which will cause them to automatically land on that page when they log in. So if there are any filters or views set on that page, those will also be saved now and applied at login. So for example, let's say I decided to make the policies page of the library my start page because I'm actively working on a lot of policies right now. I would go to the policies page of the library, like you see here on the screenshot, and I'd set any views, filters that I need and make it my start page. So in this example, you can see that I only want to see policies that I follow, and I want to view them in order they were most recently updated. So I would basically apply the star filter, show policies that I'm following, and the date view. Then I'd click the plus in the upper left-hand corner there of the page there, which is what makes this my start page. Now each time I log into Blueworks Live, I'll be brought to this page and these views and filters will be automatically applied. Now I've been told by our users that many of them frequently use the filter field on the library pages to limit the number of artifacts displayed to those that they're interested in. In fact, for many users, that's apparently the first thing that they do when they navigate to one of the library pages. They mouse over to the filter field and start typing. Well, now you don't have to mouse over there. Your cursor is automatically positioned on the filter field when you navigate to any of the library pages, which should save everybody some mouse clicks. Another enhancement we've made to the library navigation is that the filters and views that you set on spaces, processes, policies, decisions, and space overview pages will be persisted across your session now. So for example, if you set the spaces state filter to archived for a particular space and navigate away from this page, upon returning to the page, the archive filter is still going to be in effect. So no more having to constantly reset your filters as you navigate around Blueworks Live, but please do pay attention to this at first, as it may take a little getting used to, since you're probably accustomed to always having the defaults applied when you navigate to a page. And then once you log out, these settings are reset to the defaults. And similarly, on the process diagram page, We've heard users complain about having to reset the default process diagram display settings too frequently. Say, for example, I've got really long activity names in a particular diagram. If I select Reset All Item Names to Fit so that I can see the long activity names on the diagram, and then I navigate to somewhere else in Blueworks Live, when I come back to that diagram, basically it's reverted to the default setting. And I have to reset it if I want to resize those to fit again. And we've heard this same complaint related to the Show Activity Numbering option. So the way that it works now is if you select one of these display options for a particular diagram, that will remain in effect for all diagrams until you log off or until you explicitly reset it. Now, for those of you that use the active archived filter, typically admins, I guess, that are trying to clean up your accounts and delete archived artifacts, you'll find that the filters work a little differently now. Previously, there were some inconsistencies in Blueworks Live in how archived artifacts were displayed, depending on whether they had been explicitly archived versus implicitly archived. In other words, as a result of one of their parent spaces being archived rather than the space that they're in being archived directly. Now the active archived filter on the space overview page will display archived artifacts consistently regardless of how they were archived. And the space summary Excel export will also display the archive counts consistently. So I'm glad we got that straightened out. Now let's take a look at the enhancements that we've made to the Blueworks Live Service ID. Now for those of you that aren't familiar with Blueworks Live Service IDs, they basically provide automated system access to APIs in Blueworks Live. So they're designed for use by customer developed programs that do things like generate custom weekly reports or do monthly backups of certain artifacts, things like this. And when the program calls the Blueworks Live APIs, it can use a service ID, which uses OAuth 2 instead of authenticating with a Blueworks Live user ID and password. And service IDs are created by the account admin on the account information tab. So it's something that happens, your admin's got to do it, and it happens at the account level. Previously, not all Blueworks Live APIs were available for use with service IDs. Now most Blueworks Live APIs can be invoked via service ID. So each service ID has a category which determines the set of APIs that it can access. And now when you go to create a service ID, you'll see that you can create one for any of the API categories. So artifact authoring APIs, artifact reporting APIs, user management APIs, account activity reporting APIs, and work management APIs. We've also added service ID support for a user context. So previously the service ID supported full access, basically admin privileges, to the Blueworks Live repository. Now the service ID can invoke APIs with a user context parameter when that's appropriate. So this will limit the response to only those elements visible to that user. So for example, many APIs such as followed processes, which is an API that determines the processes that a user is following, and task list, an API that returns a list of the tasks assigned to a particular user, they must be called on behalf of a specific user. So these APIs actually require that a user context be provided. Other APIs, such as the Blueprints API, can optionally be called with the user context. If a user context is provided there, only the elements that are visible to that user are included in the response. So to provide the user context, basically you pass this X on behalf of header in your request with the username as the value. And the admin needs to enable user context for a service ID on the account info page of the admin console. And this can be done either when the service ID is first created or anytime afterwards. And finally, if you want to restrict API usage to the service ID for your account, you can essentially disable basic authentication for API access, or the other way around if for some reason you didn't want to allow service IDs to be used for API access in your account. And of course, you can continue to disable all API access in your account via this page if you like, which is something you already can do today. I just thought I'd mention it. So now let's look at how IBM ID is becoming a more compelling authentication method for Blueworks Live customers that use other IBM applications. So IBM ID authentication is already available as an alternative to Blueworks Live default basic auth and Blueworks Live single sign-on. But we've made a couple of enhancements to it that I wanted to let you all know about. First of all, we've removed an existing limitation where IBM ID users couldn't copy artifacts across their accounts, so IBM ID users can do cross-account copies now. And the other change you'll see is that we've added the ability for users to log in using an IBM ID that is federated with their corporate SSO. And Blueworks Live just-in-time provisioning is also available in this scenario. So if you're using IBM ID and are interested in federating with your corporate SSO, then take a look at the IBM ID Enterprise Federation Adoption Guide, which is linked from the Blueworks Live documentation. Just look at the IBM ID section of the documentation, which you can find it just doing a search in the Blueworks Live online documentation. And contact Blueworks Live support. So Blueworks Live support will help you get configured to use IBM ID Enterprise Federation. And last but not least, I just wanted to let you all know that there's a new blog post and a new tutorial available about Blueworks Live Glossary Management for editors, really. It's geared towards that may not be real familiar with the workings of the Blueworks Live Glossary. So they cover topics like importing and exporting glossary values, querying where glossary values are used, the visibility settings in the glossary, merging and deleting glossary values, and things like this. So you can see the links here on this slide, and I'll also add them to the Blueworks Live release blog so that you can easily find them and navigate to them if you're interested in this. And so that's all I've got for today. So in this session, we've seen how this release of Blueworks Live is providing a more productive user navigation experience, enhancing the Blueworks Live Service ID, and improving support for IBM ID users. Amongst the navigation improvements, we saw how editors and contributors can pretty much set any Blueworks Live page as their default start page, and any views that are in effect on that page are saved and applied at login. We saw that the default positioning of the cursor is now in the filter field on library pages. When the user enables key views or filters on the Blueworks Live library pages, those choices are now retained for the entire user session unless they're explicitly reset. Diagram preferences also, in particular activity numbering and reset text to fit, these also remain in effect throughout the user session for all blueprints unless they're explicitly reset. And the active archive filters behave consistently across Blueworks Live now. We saw the service ID enhancement, so most Blueworks Live APIs are now available for use with the service ID. The service ID now supports invocation of Blueworks Live APIs with the user context parameter. And for accounts that want to restrict API usage to the service ID, basic authentication can be disabled for API access or vice versa. We also covered the IBM ID improvements. So IBM ID users can now copy artifacts across Blueworks Live accounts. They can also log in using an IBM ID that's federated with their corporate SSO and leverage just-in-time provisioning as well. And finally, we saw there's a new blog post and tutorial for Blueworks Live Glossary Management. And so now let's see if anybody's got any questions. And if you raise your hand, I'll unmute you and you can ask your question, or you can type your question into the chat. So thanks everybody for attending, and I hope that this is that you find this useful. Thanks so much.